All right, we got one on still here. One big fat one right here. Let's bring him in for a good look. Oh, that's a beautiful fish. Look at that sucker. Hey, that is a big fish. I don't know what this one is, but I think it might be the biggest. This guy's still here. Okay, hold on. All right, here we go. It's another day in paradise, I guess. It's one flavor of it anyway. It's Wednesday, January 15th. That makes it the 14th for the majority of people here. What's going on today? Well, we had breakfast. Kind of sore. I led the charge in the gym yesterday. Sarah kept right up. I couldn't believe it. She's doing good, but she's a little sore. We're going back today. We go every day. And what else is going on here? I got a shit pile of emails. And it's funny, you know, as I keep up on what's going on the planet, don't you think it's kind of amazing that at some period of time in our fairly recent history, a group of human beings figured out the urgency, and some kind of effective recipe that works on us as a herd and kept us dumb as a pickle. How did they figure that out so soon? And how did they tackle it with such ferocity that they managed to get us to where we are today, with the majority of us not knowing which way's up when it comes to our reality and true history, and only a small handful do? How the hell did those sons of bitches get to that stage so rapidly? I don't understand that. That's a little bit of a puzzle for me, one of my mysteries that I observe. How do they do it? You know what I mean? I mean, we were all became human beings roughly the same time, I would imagine. You know what I mean? I know my lips don't mesh up in my brain smoothly at times, but it just really kind of freaks me out how such a small group of human beings figured out the recipe to screw the majority of other human beings over so easily, so effectively, to put it in their favor and maintain that clusterfuck of hurting us. You know, are you picking up what I'm putting down? Kind of bizarre, isn't it? Kind of frickin' bizarre. Anyway, before I get rambling too much and sound like an absolute psychopath, let's get some important voices heard, which is all of you. All of you. I hope the majority of the people listening have figured it out, along with me, that we have been conditioned to sit there with our mouths agape and listen to one human being as some kind of authority, or the speaker, or the person. You know what I mean? It's in our face every day today. I mean, if you look at some of the most popular people we all listen to just online, when you really look at that one person that you listen to, why? Why do you actually listen to that one person? What put them in that position to be some kind of this is the person to listen to? You know, I don't get it. The more I go in this ride, the more I realize I have to listen to all of you. That's my priority in my ride. That's where I am going to get better. That's where I am going to learn the most, is listening to all of you. Not one person, not a celebrity. God, you know what I mean? I'm probably a little confusing this morning. I know the point I'm trying to get across, but it doesn't seem to mesh up my lips smoothly, because I don't practice, I don't rehearse, I don't write it down. But I hope I'm making a difference in helping people realize that, or give them the option to have a go at listening to all of us as equal human beings. With each individual, each one of us has different flavors of knowledge, you know, and we're not going to even know anything about it unless we listen to them. We got to find those individuals and listen to them, all of you, so we can advance and hopefully make life better. You know, make life better for us and the next one's coming, instead of how it's been going. Well, there's a ramble, coffee-induced ramble. I know it probably sounded crazy, but sorry. Let's get on with it. One of these days, maybe I will rehearse and practice and get my thoughts down on paper so I can share them smoothly, but I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down. Here we go. This is titled The Club of No Return. Thank you and Sarah for all your help in getting the word out to everyone. My story is a book, so I'll try to downsize it. This is my third try to get my story out, as I feel it might be a good piece of the puzzle. These events are burned into my soul as they occurred recently. I do want to remain anonymous to protect my son's endeavor in his new business. He's an archaeologist. Thank God, an open-minded one. My other kids think I'm batshit crazy. I was recently diagnosed with dementia, so I need to get this out, and I'm in my 70s now. These events occurred the summer I turned 14 years old in 1965. We never heard the term Bigfoot. We moved to an old homestead out on Highway 30 in northwest Oregon. Our landlady was 80 years old and was born in this homestead along Tandy Creek. She told us the natives called it Ghost Hollow Road, but spoke of it in their native language. So we thought we were up against spirits/ghosts. We lived here between mid-May to October. Sightings and visitation at least 3 to 4 times a week. The visits came as soon as our parents left to go party at the local pubs in town. Heavy drinkers/alcoholics and not good parents. We were allowed to do whatever we wanted on the weekends as long as we showed up for school on Monday. These beings showed up within 15 minutes of my parents leaving, making their way down the creek bed, always making themselves known by knocking down the TV antenna on the roof. We had a huge old apple orchard and blackberry briars everywhere. Lots of great food for them. They arrived at dusk and stayed till dawn, tramping around our house and especially my bedroom, which was unfortunately the back porch, windows all around and a small back door with a deadbolt. So I told myself I was safe. I believed these beings would not reach through the glass windows to get me, knowing the broken glass could hurt me. Boy, was I dumbfounded. We got to know the neighbor boy who had guns. I'll try to get these right. A 33 rifle, a 22 rifle, and a sawed-off 22 became my favorite weapon. When we realized they weren't ghosts, we hunted them, bringing kids out to our place from town as the rumors spread about camping and hunting monsters. We were very popular that summer. These beings started out invading our house when we were gone. Always the same thing happening. The locked front door was always wide open. The TV on, the kitchen sink running, and the bathtub faucet running, and the back porch door left open, my bedroom. Damn. I had 4 visual sightings over that spring and summer and fall. They even followed me into town. They seemed more interested in us girls, all blondes, by the way. My closest encounter was 5 feet away, as a huge head appeared in my living room window. The head on this thing was 3 feet itself. These beings had 3-inch hair all over their faces. You could barely make out the nose and mouth, but my God, the eyes were huge and blank. We caught sight of one running in the field alongside of us while we were in a friend's car, 40 miles per hour. I'll never forget it. I was chased out of the woods with what we thought was trees falling over on our horses on an old logging road. They did some rock throwing at me and my girlfriend as we walked down Old Highway 30. I wanted to blame my brother, but these dudes were too accurate. The rocks always landing less than 20 feet in front or behind us. We even started running, but the rocks were still spot on. They never vocalized or smelled bad. We chased them and shot at them all summer. They never hurt us, never. Apparently forgiving us for our stupid antics, they ranged from 8 to 14 feet tall, as we could see their heads behind the blackberry bushes surrounding our yard. I hated that yard. I had to cross over a small footbridge to get out to the road, to wait for the school bus for that fall, by myself. And sure enough, I had my scariest sighting to date, also my first mind speak. 3 of them showed up that fall morning, bringing what I thought was a female with them. She was in the middle of 2 large dark ones. She was the smallest and white, with a few dark patches on her, 8 feet tall. The dude on the right was 11 or 12 feet tall, and the one on the left was about 9.5 feet. The mind speak came with a rush of emotion in it. They came to say goodbye and asked me if I wanted to go with them, knowing I would be too scared to even consider it. They told me they brought the female with them so I could see how they revered their women. It's all I can do to keep my composure even now as the sadness and sheer terror overwhelms me. I cry tears as I close this book, LOL. And this summer I will be a member now for 60 years. I've not been able to tell my story to anyone. No one wants to hear it out of disbelief, fear, or madness. After watching your podcast, I know now that my last encounter was in New Mexico. It was a shimmering, huge being stepping out of an 8-inch tree. Back in 2018, my intuition tells me, after mind speak, you are forever connected to them. They have shared knowledge. Once one knows you, they all do. With the exception of the rogue ones. They're cut off. And be mindful of the implications of mind speak, just in case my gut feelings are what I fear. End of email. Holy cow. Wow. Well, you got my attention. I'm sad to hear your diagnosis, but you know what? I would almost do anything to hear more from you. If you would share more sometime, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm sure everyone else listening would as well. I have a funny feeling you've got a lot more information and a lot more knowledge and experiences. Well, at least we got that first one cracked open, right? As a start, a big start. I'm so glad you chose all of us here to share with. You found your people. Wow. There you go, you guys. Take from what you will, leave it. But if I could encourage you to maybe one day email us again with even more, I would absolutely appreciate it. Thank you so much for that email. Thank you so much. Incredible, right? There's a lot said in there that rings familiar with a lot of people here, does it not? Wow. All right, now, what I did today while looking in my emails, because I don't know if any of you remember a while back, last year, whatever, I lost around 2,500 emails. I didn't lose them, but they left my inbox as read when I copied and pasted and put them in my notes, and my old phone screwed up, lost everything. And sometimes it really bothers me. And it bugs me to think that somebody wrote in and might not get heard ever. That part really bugs me. Because it takes a lot for people to write in, right? Anyways, I went back, and I think I might have narrowed down a time period when these emails might have disappeared. Because what I have to do is I got to go back to my email. One of them has 10,000 plus emails in it and try to figure out what wasn't read but is marked as read. That sucks. But anyway, I might have found one, so here we go. A solo mountain bike overnight encounter is the title of the email. It's a roll of the dice, but we'll see. I've made several overnight stays at nature preserves using a hammock, a tarp, and a mountain bike. It's a great way to relax. I don't sleep much, being a 22-year veteran, but on these trips I sleep like a baby, sometimes more than 6 hours straight. I do zero-impact camping, no evidence, no fire. I had an encounter with something. I've always doubted it was a Bigfoot, but the more I listen to stories and the more I research, I just can't seem to explain it away. It was late in the day on this trip, November time frame. I had my high-output LEDs on the bike because it was getting dark. I found a nice pair of trees in a small clearing on top of a hill. I set up my hammock with the tarp in a raised position so I could see all around, and I didn't think it would rain, and there was no wind. It was a cloudy night, no moonlight, and with my headlamp off, I could see my hand in front of my face. I had my DSLR camera and a tripod, tried some low-light shots. They were coming out just black, so I gave up on taking photos and stowed my camera gear. I don't go armed. It's a very liberal area, and all I have is a pair of hiking poles to defend myself. I've been having a lot of coyote encounters, so this night I removed the headlight from my bike and hung it on my ridge line. 1,800 lumens, very bright. I figured a blind coyote would not be much of a threat. And as usual, once it's dark, the woods come alive, stuff moving everywhere. You could hear the craziest sounds. There's no doubt in my mind the animals in the woods communicate very well. They always seem to know I'm there. And some are curious and come close. And as they close in, they're usually making some kind of a noise, which is repeated at a distance by a second animal. And on this night, something heavy was moving toward me. It wasn't the typical rustle of leaves or shuffling. It was slow and methodical. Step, step, pause. Step, step, pause. After a long pause, there was a sudden and incredibly loud thump, like somebody took a giant baseball bat and whacked it against the ground. Now I figured I must have some large buck trying to get a start out of me. I decided to let him get within about 15 feet, and then I'll hit him with the light, so I can have a good look at what it is. Now the approach was 2 steps and a whack. Step, step, whack. Long pause. Step, step, whack. Man, this is crazy. This thing just kept getting closer. I turned on the light, and 2 orange eyes sat high in the air. They dropped low to the ground and started to swing methodically back and forth. All I could see was the eyes. There is some very light brush in that direction, but I really don't understand why I did not get a reflection from the body. The eyes moved back and forth, kind of like a snake getting ready to strike. I figured that was enough, and I turned off the light. And this thing took off like some kind of a rocket. In 5 bounds, it must have been a half a mile away. I heard several of the same interactions I had heard earlier that night. Some weird squawking-like sounds back and forth from different locations, and then all was quiet, and I went to sleep. I always wrote this off as a deer, and I can't find anybody that has had a similar encounter with a deer. With the massive amount of time you have in the wilderness, you must have had something similar happen, especially if it was just a deer. Let me know what you think. I still think it was a deer. Don't use my name if you do read this. I'm not supposed to be staying out in the nature preserves past dark. Okay, man, I gotcha. I gotcha. And you already know what I'm going to say by now, I'd imagine. It wasn't a deer, and you know what it was. There you go. Boom. Right? As soon as I said it went low to the ground side by side, I pictured that creepy-ass position they can do. Sprawled out on the ground, chest down, but not on the ground, with arms, legs out to the side like an insect, which is so freaking creepy to picture that shit. But it sounds like that's what it did. But I think the walking toward and whacking the tree at the same time, that's not a common one so far. Very unnerving, though. In a hammock, like I said in the past, you'll never catch me in a hammock. Ain't gonna happen. Ever. Never. I'm not getting clotheslined by either a bull moose, a bull elk, or worse. I'm not sitting there wrapped up like a human taco with a drawstring on either end of my body. Anyway, teach your own. This next email is titled, My Encounter. Hi, Steve. My name is Tom. You can use my name if you want, and I hope this email finds you well. I've told one person this story, and it was to my 16-year-old nephew, and I told him recently. The guy I was hunting with doesn't know for fear of his ridicule, but this story we refer to as the Hunting with the Three Stooges Day. All right, let's get into it. It started out the day before opening archery season in Pennsylvania, northwestern PA, Allegheny National Forest. As we were hanging tree stands so we don't have to haul them in on the long walk in. We like to go where no one else does, about 7-8 miles drive in, and then another mile or so walk in. That's where the big bucks hang out, as I'm sure you know. As we left our stands, I put a lock on mine, and why? I'll never know. The morning couldn't come quick enough because we had cameras hung and checked them after we hung our stands, revealing a 180-inch buck, plus a buck, and several shooters, and hardly slept that night. Well, morning came and we headed out. I put my key to my stand in my wallet, and leaving in the morning, forgot I did that, and left my wallet on the camp table. Not realizing this until I was at my stand, my buddy wasn't very happy, nor was I, and I told him to go to his stand and I'll go get the key. He agreed, and when I returned to unlock my stand, the key broke off in the lock. This is why we referred to hunting with the Stooges Day. I radioed him to tell him what happened, and I'll go to the pine spot, and it's an old dead pine that fell over that you can walk out on, and it overlooks a small clearing about 80 to 100 yards away with a natural seat about 15 feet up. And as daylight broke, the woods were alive with the regular critters, squirrels, chipmunks, etc. And I was sitting for about an hour or so when I suddenly noticed that all the sounds had stopped, like someone shut the sound off, and a feeling of get out of the woods now came over me. I can't explain it. Never happened before or since, and as I exited the woods, the smell of wet dog that rolled in a pile of rotting guts is the only way to explain it, overcame my lungs, making it hard to breathe, and I couldn't get to my truck fast enough. The feeling I had wasn't terror, but as that I didn't belong, like I was trespassing and was being pushed out of that spot. I've been back to that spot, but not alone, and I do intend on going back by myself soon, as it is buck season in PA. Thank you for your great videos, and as an avid person who watches Sasquatch videos, what you stand for and what you're trying to do is awesome. I have another story from when I was 15 and spent a week with my great aunt in northwestern Wisconsin in the mid-'80s. But that's for another time. Thanks again. Keep the videos coming. And there you go. I want an update from that man. From you. Yeah, if you give me an update, I almost would bet dimes to dollars you've had more things go on if you kept going back there and hunting as well. And I want to hear what happened to you and your aunt. If you want to email back sometime again, I hope so. Welcome to the club. Next is titled Retired Military. Hi, Steve. It's been enlightening and a blessing to have had the opportunity to discover your channel. I came across your channel right at the first video of sharing your grandfather's story. When I listened to that, it immediately brought up what I might consider to be repressed memories. I'm a retired U.S. Army now, and it was my childhood that well prepared me for that career path of combat arms. Several deployments overseas and work across the globe, I found myself medically retired decades later and evolving into a truther. I'd say my childhood experiences coupled with my military career assisted with this transition for a search for truth. The other was 9/11. One thing I feel with my soul is Sasquatch is most certainly real. First experience, I grew up in the northern Sierra Nevada mountain range hunting with my dad since I was big enough for a backpack. I was at my first bear tree while hunting with hounds when I was a year old, hunting with my dad, along with playing lots of sports, and even more chores than the average kid, evolving me into someone that was effective in navigating the mountains I loved so much and later my career. Before liberals ruined California ecosystem, spring bear season was a thing and hound hunting was still practiced. Bears could be pursued but not taken. It provided a training season for hounds. Night hunting was allowed during spring bear season, so the days required naps and sometimes camaraderie with other hunters we knew. We roughed it and napped on the ground until it was too warm or the ants began to bite. I woke up with the sun in my eyes and a stench in the air as my father still napped. I couldn't shake the smell. The dogs were on the stake line behind me near a spring, with alders nearby to provide a little cover. This area we'd camp in was a small meadow with one moon dust covered road in and out. Let me read that smooth. The area we camp in was a small meadow with one moon dust covered road in and out. In the center was a small cedar grove where we camped. The edge of the meadow was surrounded by thick timber that created good cover to dig a cat hole to do your business. And as I shook the cobwebs from my nap, the odor of spoiled salami immediately came to mind, like a sweet, spoiled meat stench. Salami and summer sausage was always a snack with pepper jack crackers and a soda during hunting season, and I was keen to the smell. This was different, though, because it was so intense. And looking back, it's probably what actually woke me up. I walked over to the tree line to relieve myself, and as my eyes adjusted to the dark timber, I noticed cat holes that had been filled in and covered. I noticed that the cat holes had been filled in and covered were now uncovered. I thought it was strange, but passed it off as an inquisitive animal. I zipped up, walked quickly back to the cedar grove, and woke my father to explain what was happening. He initially passed it off as a child's imagination, but then things changed. My dad sat straight up and began to look around. Simultaneously, every hair on our bodies stood straight up. You mentioned how important it is to have a dog with you as an early warning device. Well, we turned around to see what the hounds were doing, and they were scared shitless. These dogs hunted bears, cougars, bobcats, and hogs. They were all trained, happy to hunt, and nothing intimidated these dogs in the woods. That all changed that afternoon. These dogs were laid out flat at the ends of their string line and looked like they were wishing their way to China. My dad told me to grab my gear and get in the truck while he loaded the dogs. My father never scared. He was a logger, a hunter, and cowboyed a little. He's 80 now and still rides his horse and bucks hay. He's tough as nails. And that afternoon, I saw a different man. I couldn't wait in the truck, and I grabbed what we had for protection, which was a Winchester 94 behind the seat. I jumped on top of the dog box in the back of the pickup and covered my dad as he loaded the truck. Something came over our senses. Experienced hunters don't have reactions like this in the woods. We assess, evaluate, and strategize a game plan to be successful. And at that moment, all we wanted to do was get out fast, as we could hear the occasional large branch snap while whatever it was circled us. This is all happening at dusk. Once the old 72 Chevy pickup was loaded, we were rolling out, scared out of our wits. We still didn't think we were safe. As we egressed, the headlights were on and winding around the moon dust-covered two-track trail, we noticed something had stirred up the dust ahead of us. We came around a corner and caught a glimpse of something very large and dark cross the road just beyond the peripheral of our headlights. And as we drove what seemed like to be 3 mountain ranges before we stopped the truck, we tried to reason with our minds what animal it could have been. Moose and elk were non-existent, and nothing explained the smell. I researched the school and community libraries, and at 10 years old I never found an answer, but I already knew. Second experience. I'm 12 years old and camping with my family near a local swimming hole outside of Sierra City, California. We brought family that hadn't camped before, so we tried to make accommodations comfortable for the females in camp. And after a day of swimming, we finished out the eve with the typical hot dogs, burgers, and s'mores. It was an established campground, complete with restroom facilities. Not our style of roughing it, but it worked for the situation. In the eve before dusk, people were out walking or bicycling the access loop road through the campground. And as I sat outside the tent with my cousin, we heard the most god-awful scream. It sounded like a woman was being murdered, but she used a loudspeaker to project her voice. The campground stopped. Everything went dead silent. We all heard it. It was impossible to not have heard it. I could hear chatter begin from the other camps and the men stepping into the road, asking one another where it came from. No one heard or saw anything else that night. Other campers went down into town to alert authorities. There was a quiet surrounding the campground that night, and the previous night was louder than we wanted to experience. This night, not a peep from the other camps. I've heard cougars scream, but it was nothing like that and 100 times louder. The scream shook the soul. Third experience. 3 years later, my father had a mining claim a few short miles from the first encounter, and we also used it for a hunt camp during deer and bear seasons. We arrived one day to discover something had been bedding down in the ferns directly behind the camp trailer. We didn't discover any tracks, but we really didn't look very hard either. We considered it was probably a bear who'd already moved on. We had a spring coming out of an old mine tunnel nearby, which provided probably the best drinking water I ever had. It was a great place for any creature to stop and rest. And later that night, as I laid in the top bunk with my uncle below me, I stared out of my window that viewed the hillside with the moon overhead. It was close to full moon that night, and it lit up the vegetation, casting shadows. And as I gazed outside my window from my bunk, my eyes fixated on a bush 2/3 up the hill. You know how it is. You stare at something long enough, you see what you want to see. And as I stared at the bush, it began to get a little smaller, a little larger, slight movement. I considered it could have been a bear, but we had dogs with us, and they were sleeping in the dog box back of the truck. Anything around would have most certainly alerted them. My suspicion grew until I interrupted my dad and my uncle's late-night banter about whose fart stinks more. I asked my uncle to look out his window to the hillside and see if he noticed anything. And my dad immediately asked if a bush turned into a bear, and we all chuckled. But shortly thereafter, the giggles stopped as my uncle locked onto the bush It was a calm, clear night with no breeze, yet this bush has a gentle, subtle, steady sway or rocking motion to it. And as they got up and headed outside to check on the dogs and maybe get a better view, I remained fixed on the bush in case it moved when they stepped outside. The swaying bush remained, yet they couldn't see it from outside. My uncle had seen it from his bed, but outside the bush didn't exist. My father pulled out his 2 best strike dogs, and they wandered back inside as quickly as possible. I could still see it, and as they returned to the warmth of the camp and prepared for bed again, I continued to gaze. None of us could make sense of it as we discussed the oddness of the situation. And at that moment, the bush stood up into a hunched over crouched position, but much larger than a bear. Plus, we already ruled out a bear because of the dog's reaction, and in a few steps, it disappeared into the shadows of the timber. It moved on all 4s, but whatever it was, didn't look like it moved like that usually, like a man trying to make himself smaller as he exits a crowd. It was a moonlit night, but whatever it was, it didn't silhouette itself, and it didn't stand at a full upright bipedal posture. In that location, there was enough light to see what I saw and nothing more. Did it cloak itself while my dad and uncle were outside? Who knows? Wow, that's an incredible, weird, odd one, isn't it? 4th experience. 13 years later, I'm on military leave and I link up with my dad in central Idaho for a public lands elk hunt. After exhausting an area, then expanded area for better than a week, I focused my efforts further to the north. And right before dark on the 12th day of my 14-day hunt, I spot this massive 7x8, and he wasn't going anywhere, so I made a plan to bust out early a.m. And needless to say, as I went after that bull the next morning, I pulled the trigger on a smaller bull out of angst. I never saw that big bull again. Oh, that sucks. My experience was in the first area I was hunting around day 5. As I began to expand my hunt to the north, I drove out a logging road to a dead end where I'd take off into the woods from there. It was like any mid-October day. It was sunny and brisk, beautiful day, and I was excited about the hunt, and I was feeling positive to say the least. I stepped off the road and into the tree line after crossing a creek bottom. I skirted up the hill into the timber on the other side, leaving the truck and road out of sight. And as I always do, whether a hunt through the woods or on a patrol through the jungle, etc., I do the same thing. I step off into the wood line, away from the noise, and pop a squat. And this is where I listen and let my senses adjust. In the military, this also involved water breaks, comms, and map checks. In the woods, my senses tuned into the squirrel chatter, a bird flying by, the water flowing down the hill behind me, just tuning in and getting ready. Once I started off, the game plan changed. In the military, we call this a FRAGO, fragmentary order, where the original plan is deviated by higher. Is almost always the case and expected, but not when I'm on leave, on an elk hunt. It felt like time stopped. The trees stood still, the squirrels stopped chattering, and I could hear anything. I couldn't hear anything other than the heartbeat in my chest. And from my experience, this only happens right before I'm about to take a shot. My senses hone in and everything else fades as I take the breath. And this time, I felt the breath was taken away from me as my vision closed and my heartbeat pounded in my ears. I flipped my safety off, went to a high ready, as I immediately knew I just walked into an ambush. I lost my senses, Steve. My head ached. My vision was blurry, and I had difficulty moving as if I was walking through deep, loose sand. I pulled off my back to a few trees that stood close together and leaned against them to keep from falling over. My mind said I was in trouble, but I didn't know where it was coming from. I've been around bears, black and grizzlies, and I'm as alert and attentive to nature as the next experienced outdoorsman, but at that moment, I felt like a lost child. There was a lapse in time. There was a lapse of time this occurred. I was less than 10 minutes from the truck, but I was away for a couple of hours. Once I was able to gather my senses, I quickly hiked out to the truck, and once I arrived, I knew something was watching. For the first time on a hunt, I was scared for my life. I couldn't get turned around and out of there fast enough. I never told my father, even though we had each shared experiences together. I never told anyone that story until now. As an adult, I remember how I felt after my first incident when I returned to the school library to have the librarian giggle when I asked for books on Sasquatch. I held a top secret clearance with SCI in my military career and entrusted with millions upon millions worth in men and equipment. I didn't want to risk that. I proudly served my country, but I have always known our government with others had done dirty shit. Once I was sent home with my desert card. Once I was sent home with my desert card punched, I began to seek truth. From the JFK assassination, 9/11, deep state, aliens, Enoch and the Nephilim, ascension, free energy, and to my experiences in those mountains as a child. I believe it's all connected, Steve, and as we move forward into 2021 and further, dark will become light. Those experiences didn't end my hunting days, and actually it was my last deployment. Over the years, war changes people. Maybe I did too. I do more fly fishing than anything else these days, and nature is still my go-to. Nothing has permanently chased me out of the woods. I won't allow it. In my opinion, I believe these beings are genetic mutations of the Nephilim, as one of your viewers described. While overseas, we all knew of the Giant of Kabul. Others in specific units of the U.S. military speculate missions took place to eradicate more than one. I also believe they can sense your soul and its intent. If you're someone looking to exploit the situation, you're likely to never see anything. If your heart is pure and you're spiritually strong, they pick up on that and let you be while providing a warning. You're still not welcome. In my opinion, I believe spirituality acts as a shield because they are of the Nephilim. Thank you for this forum. Your effort will be commended for a long time, Steve. You bring people together and help them heal. It's therapy to those who've held on to their encounters. And believe it or not, you're doing God's work, brother. Stay true to yourself, Steve, and watch your six. Shit hits the fan. You have another that's got your back. Peace and love to you, my brother. Cliff, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Cliff, appreciate that, man. I may have read that before, but it wasn't sounding very familiar until I got to the very end. But we've had a lot of people email in, Army vets, armed forces vets. Uh-oh, I can hear voices screaming next door. Sounds like somebody's arguing. Creepy. Anyway, lots to chew on. Hey, guys, a lot to chew on, right? A lot to chew on. Got to appreciate those people who take the dive into trying to figure out what the shit show's going on. There is a lot coming to light. There's a lot of BS getting exposed. Oh boy. Maybe it's time to sign off. Whoever's next door is German and they're yelling at each other. Imagine that, eh? Being in paradise, going at each other. Shit. Oh well. All right, guys.